Hello everybody, this is Gustavo Exam Coach. This new video is about the topic of conjunctions. This is a follow-up of our previous video in which we discussed fundamental theory of the English grammar about clauses and sentences in written English. Conjunctions are the means to connect clauses. So let's begin. When we talk about conjunctions, we're talking about these elements that we use to put together clauses when we form compound and complex sentences in English. Let's take a look. There are actually 4 different types of conjunctions or conjunction-like expressions in English. The first 3 types are called coordination conjunctions, correlation or correlative conjunctions, conjunctive adverbs, which are 3 different kinds of elements that we use to connect independent clauses. Remember that when we connect independent clauses, this is the time when we assemble a compound sentence in English. Now, there is a 4th type of conjunction that is called subordination conjunctions. And this is the elements we use to connect independent clauses and subordinate clauses, the kind of elements that we use to assemble complex sentences in written English. So let's talk about a first type, the coordination conjunctions. The word coordination suggests that we are putting together similar structures, right? Conjunctions are words that we can use to join other words, phrases, or clauses, right? And the coordinating conjunctions connect structures that are of the same value in meaning, right? Words that have the same part of a speech, phrases that have the same grammar type, or independent clauses, right? And these conjunctions can express relationships of addition, alternative, contrast, or cause and result between these structures. So we have 7 expressions that you can see listed above, right? For, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. And we use them in different cases to express different relationship between words or clauses. An example of using these coordination conjunctions to connect words could be seen in this example over here. The flower known as baby's breath starts to bloom in June or July. June or July. 2 months, 2 nouns, right? In which we're expressing alternative. The second example says, in the classic fable, the tortoise crawls slowly but steadily to win the race with a hare. Okay? Slowly but steadily. 2 adverbs of manner that contrast somehow. Also, it is possible to use coordination conjunctions to connect phrases, but phrases that have a similar grammar form. For example, in this sentence, we see a jet engine takes in air at the front and ejects it from the back. Take a look that takes in air at the front and ejects it from the back are both verbal phrases. That is, phrases that are led by a conjugated verb for some subject, which in this case is the subject in the main clause of this sentence, jet engine or a jet engine. So the 2 verbal phrases are being put together using and. In another example, we see the first agents of socialization are the child's parents or the other adults who take care of the child. So we see the 2 underlying phrases. The child's parents is a noun phrase. The other adults is another noun phrase. And we are putting them together using or, which in this case, both are the subject complements of the subject, the first agents of socialization. But the most interesting role for coordinating conjunctions is when they connect independent clauses to form a compound sentence. For example, Churchill is icebound 8 months a year, yet its harbor has a long history. talking about this sea town of Churchill. First, it is said that the place, this location, is icebound 8 months a year. And another information or piece of information is added, but in a contrasting way. Say that the harbor of Churchill has a long history. So, despite the fact that Churchill is covered by ice, right, yet the harbor is very well known. So, yet here has a similar meaning to but, producing contrast between these two clauses. We have another example. Reptiles cannot regulate body temperature physiologically, so they must regulate it behaviorally. Okay, two independent clauses talking about reptiles, and they are connected using so, which in this case establishes a sort of cause and result relationship between the two clauses for another compound sentence. All right, let's keep going. Let's now talk about correlation or correlative conjunctions. Okay, these are conjunctions that help connect structures that are parallel or complementary in their relationship. These structures have to be of the same value if we are to connect them using correlative conjunctions. They could be words, phrases, or independent clauses. But the correlative conjunctions have two parts. That is, usually they are made up of two words. So they are called two-part conjunctions or paired expressions. We have, for example, some of these paired expressions to express addition of different ideas or words or phrases. For example, X and Y as well as Z. We have also both X and Y, not only X, but also Y, for expressing alternative between two items or ideas, either X or Y, neither X nor Y. And to express exclusion or inclusion, we have not X, but Y. Notice that when we connect verbal items of the same value using correlative conjunctions, these items being put together, X, Y, and Z, they might be clauses. And if they are clauses, then we need to use a comma just before the second part of the correlative conjunction. You can see an example here. Not only I have to take the GMAT, and you can see the comma, but also I need to complete two application essays. And in the second example, we see neither Tiffany has a complete understanding of the complex sentence, comma, nor she has studied all types of modifiers. So a comma is needed when we use these correlative conjunctions to put together clauses, right? So these two last examples are also examples of compound sentences using correlative conjunctions. Let's go over more examples. If you use correlative conjunctions to connect words, you could have, for example, this. Thomas Jefferson was a farmer and architect, as well as a statesman. So we have this structure, X and Y, as well as Z. Notice that you need to place a comma before as well as. Another example, an animal in a state of torpor is neither active nor responsive. Okay, we're putting together two adjectives that qualify or describe an animal, the subject of the sentence, by saying neither active nor responsive. That is, these are two qualities that are both being excluded or not applicable to the subject of the sentence. It's like saying an animal in a state of torpor is not active and it is not responsive. How about connecting phrases with correlative conjunctions? We have rats are both agricultural pests and carriers of disease. Notice how agricultural pests and carriers of disease, both noun phrases, are being put together with the structure both X and Y. In the next example, you can see another case. Many people learn about job openings not by reading the newspaper, but by talking to people who work. So we see that two prepositional phrases, by reading the newspaper and by talking to people who work, are being put together with the structure not X but Y, indicating not one item but the other, that is, including one, excluding the other. How about using these correlative conjunctions to connect independent clauses? We've seen two examples before. just a moment ago in the previous slide. These two. Here, I have to take the GMAT is an independent clause, and so is I need to complete two application essay, another independent clause. Same goes to the example below. Says, either Tiffany has a complete understanding of the complex sentence. Yeah, this is another independent clause, and she has studied all types of modifiers is a second independent clause. Let's see one more example here. Either a society changes through innovation and contact with other societies, or it remains stagnant and isolated. So you can see that there are two independent clauses, a society changes, and so on. And the second one is it remains stagnant, and so on. And they're being connected, these two independent clauses, using either X or Y. But notice that before or the second part of this correlative conjunction, there is a comma, mandatorily. All right, so now we see it is possible to use as well as also by itself as a conjunction that is not part of a paired expression. For example, the Salish people developed their wood arts as well as their mythology. Here, as well as is a conjunction standing for and in meaning, right? Their wood arts and their mythology. Okay, same meaning. You can also omit this word also from not only but also, but you can replace this also with as well or to at the end of the clause because they build up a similar meaning. You have, for example, astronomers are beginning to understand not only the physical makeup of stars, but their origins and life cycles as well. It's the same as saying not only the physical makeup of stars, but also their origins and life cycles. Or, for example, in a second sentence, Kobe is not only a major industrial city, but a center of culture too. So you see, not only a major industrial city, but a center of culture too. Instead of, but also a center of culture. All right. Now, about the structure, not X, but Y. Right? This structure is special, and it may be confused with not only, but also, but it's actually very different in meaning. When you say not X, but Y, you are making the X, right, false, and you are making Y true. So according to the following sentence, it is not true that a groundhog is a hawk. It is true that the groundhog is a large rodent. You can see the sentence, a groundhog is actually not a hawk, but a large rodent. All right? Okay, so let's keep going. We have a third type of conjunction that we use to connect independent clauses. We call this type the conjunctive adverbs. Conjunctive adverbs do not only connect two independent clauses, but they also express a very specific relationship between the ideas in the clauses, right? They work like transitions, right, between clauses. And they can express a variety, a range of relationships, such as addition, illustration, contrast, cause and result, condition, or time relationships between clauses. Take a look. Let's move on first. Conjunctive adverbs for addition. We have also, besides, furthermore, in addition, in fact, moreover. We have a first example. Many herbal remedies are not safe. Besides, their effectiveness has not been proven scientifically. And you see how this expression besides actually adds the second idea to the first. But notice the syntax. It's very specific. You can use besides after a semicolon and then follow this conjunctive adverb with a comma. Okay? Another possibility is that you actually split the complete thought into two connected ideas by using a full stop. For example, computer graphics contribute to creativity and productivity. But there is a full stop there, right? In fact, now this is our transition for addition, comma, they are a vital part of the computer-human interface. Yeah, you could also use, instead of the full stop, a semicolon. If it is a semicolon, then you actually have a complete compound sentence. But if you place a full stop, then it is a separate sentence. All right? Okay, So let's see the conjunctive adverbs for illustration. We have for example and for instance. Take a look at this sentence. The field of nursing reaches beyond medicine. Okay, clearly this is one independent clause, but there's a semicolon separating this from another idea coming later. That is, for instance, nurses may study how the medical factors affect the delivery of healthcare. Now, for instance, is used to give an example of the idea in the first clause. And same as besides in the group above, you can use this between two independent clauses, but before the conjunctive adverb, you place a semicolon or a full stop, and after it, you place a comma. Take a look at these punctuation symbols, right? A semicolon and a comma. So we may see now that we have sort of this structure, right, for conjunctive adverbs. You have independent clause 1, then we have a semicolon, and then we have a conjunctive adverb, and we have a comma, and finally, we have an independent clause number 2. So this is basically the structure when we put these two clauses together in a unique sentence. But of course, there is another possibility, which is just independent clause 1, then you add the full stop here, right? Then you have the conjunctive adverb at the beginning, plus a comma, plus an independent clause 2. But here, you have sentence 1, and here you have a sentence 2. These would be two separate sentences, no longer a single sentence. But here, this is a full compound sentence. All right? So let's keep going for the conjunctive adverbs of contrast. We have however, contrast, instead, nevertheless, on the contrary, and sort of paired contrast conjunctive adverb, like on the one hand and on the other hand. Take a look at these examples. Traditional authorities based on custom and habit. Full stop, that means first sentence ended there. Then we have the transition in contrast, comma, legal authority rests on elections and laws. All right? But we can also have these conjunctive adverbs of contrast in the middle of a sentence, joining together two independent clauses. Like here, some people with hepatitis have no symptoms. Nevertheless, they might develop liver failure. How about the use of on the one hand and on the other hand? It's a pair expression. Okay, you can also use on the one hand and on the other hand as a pair, and on the other hand, you can use it on its own. Okay, take a look. On the one hand, the majority of North Americans take their vacation in July or August. Full stop. On the other hand, a number of people prefer a winter vacation. I have the pair expression there to express contrast. But you can also use, on the other hand, alone, such as in most North Americans take their vacation in the summer. On the other hand, many prefer a winter vacation. So you can see, on the other hand here is used with a similar meaning to that of however, for example, right? Because it is all the same contrast conjunctive adverb. Okay, there's also a type of conjunctive adverbs that express a cause-result relationship between two independent clauses, such as, for example, accordingly, as a result, consequently, hence, therefore, and thus. We have the following examples. A black pigment absorbs all three primary colors. Consequently, it appears black. Global cooling occurs over hundreds of years. Hence, ice ages are very long in developing. And you can also use otherwise to express condition, right? For example, a pidgin develops as a contact language among people who speak different languages. Otherwise, communication would be impossible. And there is a group of conjunctive adverbs of time. We have afterward, we have beforehand, meanwhile, later, next, then. We have a couple of examples too. Says, a cognitive shift occurs around the age of 7. Afterward, the child has a deeper understanding of shape, volume, and quantity. And also, I was on the telephone for almost an hour. Meanwhile, the meeting started without me. Notice how the use of conjunctive adverbs of time within a compound sentence, you always have to precede the conjunctive adverb with a semicolon and follow it with a comma. But there is an exception for the use of a comma if we use conjunctive adverbs later, next, and then. For example, we played chess all afternoon. Next, we went for a walk. No comma here needed. But you also have later, we cooked a delicious meal, where we placed a comma after later. Another example, life began in the sea. Then organisms evolved capabilities to live on land. So no comma after then. It's optional, right? Now, let's try the fourth group, which is subordinating conjunctions. The name says it all. It's when we put together a subordinate clause and a main clause. And the kind of relationship of subordination that they can express between the ideas could be cause and result, contrast, or time order. So subordinators or subordinating conjunctions come always at the beginning of a subordinate clause, and they become part of the subordinate clause. So you have like the subordinator or subordinate conjunction plus the subject plus the verb plus any other complementary words as part of the clause. And all this is what we call the subordinate clause. So usually when you have an independent clause with its subject, conjugated verb, and complement, by just placing that subordinator before the independent clause, you turn it into a subordinate clause. And for example, we have subordinators for cause and result. To express cause or reason, we have this trio here with a similar, very similar meaning in English, right? For example, because glacial erosion occurs very slowly, comma, it is difficult to view in action. So we have here a first annotation about it. In order to determine where a subordinate clause ends, you place a comma. And that marks also the beginning of the independent or main clause in the sentence, in the complex sentence. Another example says that this plate is exposed to the air so that heat generated by breaking is released. Now, so that and this second group are used to express result, right, of a previous situation. So here, the subordinate clause so that heat generated by breaking is released indicates the result of the action described in the independent clause. In the third example, we read, my professor's explanation was so confusing that I could barely take notes. So we have another set of words that's working as a subordinate clause, where the trio so confusing that actually works as a subordinator, right, for the clause I could barely take notes. Yeah, we have the subject, the conjugated verb in that subordinate clause. So the whole set of three words at the beginning work as the subordinator. All right, so this is some of the subordinators that we use for cause and result. Let's try the subordinators for contrast. We have although, even though. This is a trio with a very similar meaning, just a different level of formality. Though is a less formal, although is more formal, and even though is the most formal structure to express contrast between one main clause and a subordinate clause. And we have also this pair, whereas and while, with similar meaning. We have this example here. Rice is a staple food in southern China, whereas wheat is a staple in the north. So contrast between the two ideas. We have also, while some artists have readily accepted computers, others refuse to work with them. Okay, so this is another contrast between two ideas. Two groups of artists with different attitudes toward computers, right? It is interesting that, among subordinators that can be used for contrast or for cause and result, we have other subordinators that look exactly the same, are the same word, but with very different meaning. For example, in order to express subordinate idea of time, like, for example, when we want a clause, a subordinate clause, to work as a kind of adverbial modifier in a complex sentence, we can use after, as, before, since, when, and while. Notice that here we have while, which looks exactly the same as this while, but it's very different in meaning. This while implies, simultaneity of the actions, right, in time, but this one is used for contrast. It's different, okay? We also notice that we have as here, which is exactly the same in meaning as while, okay? It means the same. We have another as here, which is exactly the same as because, right? So, same words, same subordinators, but with different meanings. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. An airplane makes an explosive noise as it breaks through the sound barrier. And when fertilizer is added to soil, the natural phosphorus cycle is disrupted. All right, so we see how these subordinators are used to express simultaneity of the ideas, of the actions. Thanks for watching, and we'll be seeing exercises about this theory of conjunctions in a coming video. See you next time.